So we're going to talk about kind of the parts of grief, right? Psychological, spiritual, social, physical, practical, and the longer term kinds of things. So again, you know, when it happens and it takes us off guard, it puts us in fight or flight or play dead, right? Like, it's like trauma. It's like trauma. We're not ready. We're just not ready. I do a lot of support with the American Cancer Society with their call center staff. And they take calls all the time with newly diagnosed patients and their family members, right? And they're in shock when they hear, right? You know, and I'm sure you know what I mean. Those kind of things. And you can see how we respond psychologically to that. All the different things, and those things are completely normal. It's a normal reaction to an abnormal thing. Don't beat yourself up for that. Normal kinds of stuff. And of course, you can see it's going to affect who we are. We're probably not our best self anywhere, including work. Right? So how do we help? How do we do those things? So again, that's the kind of loss of control, right? And control is a big issue. If you didn't know it or not, right? We like to feel in control. And have you ever been around somebody who seems to like overly control, right? Well, just think about hoarding. You know, it's a control issue. It's a grief issue. Hoarding is a grief issue. People have a hard time letting go, right? They're stuck, right? And so that's what's important to understand. It tests our existing coping style. You can see what it increases: fear, anxiety, depression. And we all can get depressed. Again, remember the issue is if we get stuck in it, right? And our self-care, and you know, and depression's real important. And basically, if we have clinical signs of depression, appetite disturbance, meaning we eat more or less than usual, sleep disturbance, sleeping more or less than we usually do, we're not self-confident, we're losing belief in ourselves, all those things. And if we have those feelings at an intense level every day for 2 straight weeks, that person needs to get help. Yeah. See what I mean? That's how we know. We all have those come and go. But when it's intense and happening every day for 2 weeks, that becomes moving into more of a clinical depression that may not get better without help. Right? So that's important. So this is sort of a kind of a hybrid of the Kubler-Ross stages of grief, which I'm sure people have heard about in different ways, right? So I just call it Sarah, right? The way to remember, again, that sense of shock, right? Even if we know. So even when I had that long time pain, allowing myself to grieve the loss of my Grammy, there was still shock when it was finally over, right? I mean, we prepare for it, but when it finally really happens, it still hits you, right? It's just how hard does it hit you? Anger, right? Sometimes, for example, with that 6-year-old, I was doing a debriefing and people were angry. And some of them were angry at God. How can you do that? How can you take away little boy's life? What's the meaning in that, right? The violence you're talking about, right? Those kind of things. What's that all about? You know? And again, and then resentment. Like, why me? Why this? What did I do, or what did they, you know? And then getting really angry, getting connected into that. And resentment is like rusting from the inside out. Resentment is a psychological kind of, all of a sudden I lost the word, but I'll get back. Okay. You get the idea, right? Right, where, you know, and then we can move to acceptance. And then continue to ask for help. Help's important. But here's the deal. That's not linear. You don't just go, oh, you know what? I was angry, now I'm done. I was resentful, now I'm done. False, right? You know what I mean. We recycle back through those things. But hopefully as we recycle back through, we continue to get just a little bit better. Baby steps. So being unstuck means not big steps. It's just little steps. You know? But don't beat yourself up if you get angry again or get resentful again, you go back. It's a part of grief. And sometimes other things will trigger that. You know what I'm talking about? You get things trigger that. Yeah, right? And then maybe that's just whatever you believe from a spiritual standpoint, or however, maybe that's just somebody's way of telling you it's time for you to do more grieving. It's time, you're ready to do some more when you're triggered, right? It's important to do those things. So again, it also raises doubt in meaning of life, right? Why? Why? Anybody know what I mean by that? Asking why? Yeah. How come? You know, his life doesn't seem fair. You know, how do I manage that? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know, right? And again, whatever your spiritual beliefs is that, you know, maybe I'll know after I die somehow. Maybe it'll come to me. I don't know. You know, and I know that there are some things that death actually heals. I had a grandfather who was a very injured and ill man. He had serious chronic alcoholism. He never found sobriety in his life. He hurt a lot of people. He hurt my mom. He hurt a lot of people with that, right? And what was interesting is when he passed away, you know, one of the things for me that helped me say goodbye is to realize that my grandpa finally found sobriety in death. He finally found it. That made me feel better to know that, right? So I think those things are important to understand. You know, I don't know the answers to that stuff. I'm not sure, but, and that's normal again. Social, right? Obviously, it can affect a couple. If you're two and you become one, right? It systemically affects families. You know what we're talking about. You talked about so many family members, you know? And you know, your siblings, your brothers, you know? I'm sure you miss them, you know? And our friends, it changes what happens at work. It changes what happens at work. It just does. So as an EAP, please remember, we're available when that stuff happens. We're available if it happens at work. That's what we can do help to. So the physical, right, I talked a little bit about appetite, sleep, waking up, you know. It affects our fitness or lack of it. And sometimes there can be medical stuff that gets involved with that too, right? Because we're not just psychological creatures. We're physical, medical. We're mental, right? We're all those other things in our life too. And so what affects one part of that can affect the other. So it's important to understand. So somebody talked about financial impact. Absolutely, right? It can. And remember that part of the EAP benefit, and I didn't share this with you at the start, is there's a brochure back there. It talks about the benefit and a handout on grief, but part of the benefit includes support for financial and legal things too. This area might be an area that would need some of that support. You may need that support. Don't be afraid to do that. Longer term issues, we talked about isolation and loneliness. That's a living hell when you feel like you're the only one. Well, you know, when you look around the room here, you're not the only one, right? You're not. You know, and even if maybe what happened to you isn't exactly the same as someone else, you know what it's like to lose somebody important to you. You know what it's like, right? And again, you can see all the things that it could affect. You know, what am I going to do now? What about my role at work? How are we going to get through? Right? All those things. And that, again, sometimes it's important to trust people around you that are trustworthy, let them help, and to spread the problem out to the right people. You know?
Randy, speak of help, and then that's Sarah acronym.
Yeah.
That's what I think I struggled with. Buried my mom 3 weeks ago, and I struggled with asking for help. I did feel alone, but I wasn't alone. I had a lot of support, and I think had I not had the support, I might have been laying next to my mom. But I didn't know how to ask people. People would say, if you need me, call me. And I didn't call people. I expected people just to show up because I didn't want to bother anybody, and I didn't want to be a Debbie Downer, and I just didn't want to put off negative energy. And I do feel like I have to be this she-woman at work, even in front of my family and friends. I always feel like I have to put this strong shield on. And so that's one of the things I'm trying to work on, is being able to ask for help, not even just in losing someone, but just in general, to say that I am human and it's okay to ask for help. That's one of my biggest struggles right now.
Anybody know what she feels like? Absolutely. Well, if I may, Carolyn sent me an email yesterday asking about this, right? And she shared with me some of those losses, and she asked, are you coming tomorrow? I said, yes, I'm going to be here. Carolyn and I go back. Carolyn's a good soul. She's not just a good worker, she's a good soul, right? And one of the things, and she showed up today. She didn't have to come, but she's sitting there. She didn't have to say what she just said, but she did, right? That takes courage. That takes a different kind of courage. That takes the courage to ask for help. So I guess what I want to say to you, Carolyn, you're asking for help. You're doing it. You're sitting here, right? You know, and that's such a hard thing, right? What does that mean? Right? You know, we don't want to bother people, especially in our time of need. Like, and so what you're kind of doing is you're deciding for other people then. How do you know somebody doesn't want to help or isn't going to want to stop doing what they do and reach out and help, right? But I get it, right? I mean, sometimes who we are too, right? Even in our grief. Yeah. You know, I know you're a strong woman, Carolyn. You've gotten through a lot of stuff. I know that. You know, so thank you for bringing that up. Appreciate it.